Welcome back to the show. Oh my goodness, I've got highlights from a Paul Barron interview. I sat down with him and it is straight fire. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. Listen, first of all, let me do this really quickly so we can run the numbers today. We need to see what's going on in the market. 1 second. All right, let's take a look at this. Right now, we are $3.86 trillion market cap. The market is up 0.2%. Bitcoin right now, 108,000 plus, 4,400 plus for Ethereum. XRP fighting back at the number 3 spot, even though we're 282. Oh my gosh. I tell you right now, I want to buy the dip again. Hey, sister-in-law, I think I'm buying the dip again. Take a look at this, 282. We're up 0.7 on the 24. We're still off 6.6 on the 7-day. But take a look at this because the whole market's off, right? Ethereum's off 6.2 on the 7-day. Bitcoin's off 5.6 on the 7-day. What does that tell us? It tells us that the entire market's down, not just one asset. And why is that? Well, at my house, it's because we're waiting for those rate cuts. And we're also waiting for Congress to get themselves back into Congress and get the laws passed. I'm hearing from Senator Lummis and the reports that she's given that they will be back by September 3rd. So watch out. Things are going to start moving. But September might be sluggish. It has been in the past. But we'll see if we get those rate cuts. Maybe it's a different take on September. Let's look at the range of price for XRP, ranging between 278. And not one of you called me and told me it was 278. Now, my feelings are hurt. Sitting at 282, we're ranging between 278 and 286. You know what? I can laugh and be happy because I know that the Genius Act doesn't work. Even though it's signed into law, it doesn't work unless they pass and sign into law that Clarity's Act too. And that is about saving and preserving and protecting the U.S. dollar dominance in the new digital on-chain economy. And that's why I feel very confident that they're going to pass it regardless of how I feel about it. I'm very happy about that notion. Now, with that being said here, I want to show you, this is an interview I just sat for with Paul Barron on his Paul Barron podcast. And let me tell you something, man. First of all, shout out to Paul. He does a great job with his channel, all of his channels and his content. His overviews and insights are absolutely incredible. And we sat down for a conversation and the time just blew by. What I'm going to do in this is I'm asked in here, when will banks use XRP in crypto services, essentially? I'm going to tackle that question, share that with you. And how about Supercycle or a market crash in 2026? And we have a pretty good take on what's going on there. Not saying that we're right, but I believe we're going to share some information that you're going to want in weighing out what that projection may be. And then we tackle Ethereum. Is it boom or bust, right? We're going to get into that and so much more. So without any more hesitation, let me bring you in. And by the way, go watch this whole thing at Paul Barron Podcast and just, subscribe and sign up because there's going to be so much more of that. And I'm pretty sure this is not going to be the last time I get to sit with Paul because I tell you, there's some synergy there with me and Paul Barron. I really, really enjoy talking to this man. So let's get started right here. This will start the conversation of Paul asking about when are banks coming into this game, right? So let's get this going right here. Check it out. Let me open this up full screen for you. There you go. We just went legit. There it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, Flare Networks, first of all, has been around for quite some time. And Hugo's analysis to me is interesting. We got into a conversation off camera that didn't even make it into the episode about the dynamic of what this really means for kind of the future of finance. And of course, what he's doing with really what I think is going to be very intriguing is the idea of a vault. And we're going to see interest-bearing yield accounts within XRP. And I think this is a big factor because if you look at the cycles of growth in crypto, a lot of people will exit assets. And let's move outside the top maybe 10. And there's a lot of people that hold so much in assets that eventually they're going to rotate into other major assets, whether it's XRP, ETH, Bitcoin, whatever it might be, for either a bear market or a slowdown. I think they're going to move these into these interest-bearing yield vaults. And if Flare really starts to package up with some of the other partners that they're talking about, that could be huge for the community. And also, I think in general, just investors as a whole. What do you think about the idea of a vault?
Well, I love the idea of a vault. Look, I mean, what is the problem with every DeFi platform we've seen in history's past? It is the bridge from where your assets are to where you're going. And that bridge between the DeFi platform has always been where the bad guys kind of find their way in and get assets. So I like the idea of a vault. And I don't mind saying, like, just going off of like Hugo's numbers, whether you're talking about 5 billion XRP being locked up in the next year or so, or these other assets that you mentioned, you're talking about the greatest unlock of idle liquidity in the digital asset space. It is not a small notion at all.
Well, and the move of what we're going to see in terms of money market money coming into stablecoin, including RLUSD, because it'll be a parked, asset where depending on what kind of yields are being paid, that's going to be just the new money market. We're not going to see old school money markets. Matt Hogan and I were talking about this, and he is still, and I am in agreement with this, and I talk about this on the show a lot. I do not understand why we have not seen more aggressive behavior from the banks. Now, sure, the Genius Act just got through, but surely they were not caught off guard on that. Mm-hmm. They had to know this was piping through DC's swamp and was eventually going to land in their doorstep and force them into the game, because I think that's the issue. Pretty soon, you're going to have a bank that you're going to have customers leave that simply says, I want to accept RLUSD. And it's a stable coin. It's a cash. It's as good as cash. Why can't I hold it there? And they're just going to start exiting. How long before we see banks start to incorporate this?
Well, I think you make a fantastic point, and the holy grail is to never sell your XRP or your assets, right? Yep. That is the holy grail, and have them work for us like the wealthiest 1% do with their stock positions. It is a beautiful idea, and I believe it's coming to fruition. Banks, I think, are waiting for the market infrastructure bill. I think they got to have the clarity. I mean, let's understand. I mean, banks are some of the most highly regulated entities on the earth, especially in the U.S. market. So I don't think, I mean, look, if people are into XRP and have done the work with XRP, they'll know that there's a lot more going on in the bank's back end.
Yeah.
Bank of America's, the PNCs, they've been working for years with Ripple and their suite of technology. So, and the XRP ledger. So Standard Chartered, for instance, right? I mean, it's Citibank, right? Yep. There is deep connections, but I think they've been very quiet about what they're going to roll out, but they'll be ready to roll out when this legislation becomes law. No doubt about it. Now, let me bring you to another clip where we move on in the conversation. And this entire interview is fire. And not because I'm in it, but because Paul Barron steers the conversation to some incredible places. Take a listen to this when we talk about, are we going to see a super cycle or a market crash in 26? And if not, why? Take a listen.
That true adoption curve, I don't think we've seen it yet. Many people are still looking at this. I know Tom Lee, he's gone on record saying, hey, he thinks we're on a 10-year bull run. I don't know if I agree with 10-year, but if we are in a super cycle, Abs and I talked about this last week, is where do you think XRP ends up in 10 years based on just the premise of what we know today? Not what the potentials are, but what we know today. What do you think?
Well, I think it's quite good wherever we end up. And the reason I feel that way, Paul, specifically is because if you look at the internet of information that we're using to communicate with your audience today, there are many different layers of protocols that make up the experience of the current internet we have. Yep. TCP/IP, HTTP, SMTP, FTP, so on and so on. And all of this provides the smooth, ubiquitous experience that we're using to communicate with everybody today. Well, when the internet came out,
it was adopted by governments and military first.
Yep.
Well, that's not the case here in this situation
That we know of.
that we know of. Exactly. But we're about to find out, right?
God bless Paul Barron for cutting in and making that comment, because I absolutely believe this entire space, if you're really deep into this, you know this entire space is an engineered government psyop from Bitcoin to everything else. Let's keep going.
That's so well said. Because the truth is that this has been a grassroots movement from the bottom up. And now with the legislation passing, the Genius Act into law, and now soon to be the Clarities Act, the Market Infrastructure Bill, I believe is going to have the same powerful impact that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 did to unlock the internet.com era for crypto.
Yep.
And that will be the signal that you're discussing here. That is the all clear, green light. You're going to see the financial legacy firms take a position in this space.
Well, it's the
No doubt about it. But let's keep going here, and let's jump forward in the conversation just a little bit and bring it to here.
Imagine this is 1999, possibly 2000, because we will see a pullback. And that is going to be an interesting time because that will test the resilience of anybody when that happens. How would you play that right now? Let's just play this out. Fred Krueger says 2026, he's a Bitcoiner, but he holds other assets. He says 2026 is going to be a boom, and we're going to see a potential pullback late 26, 27. It could be one of the biggest ever. How would you play that if that were to occur?
Wow, one of the biggest pullbacks ever.
Ever, yeah.
Wow, that would be remarkable. It's hard for me. I have trouble seeing a scenario like that because, I should be clear. Speculative assets, I think that's spot on. Assets that have utility, I don't see them taking that much of a drawdown.
So XRP, gold, Bitcoin, those kinds of assets that people are kind of referencing in terms of the comparison. And that's what, that is true because that's kind of on the boat of Tom Lee. He's kind of going in that direction too. It's interesting that we talk about Tom Lee right now because he was very early to the area of Bitcoin. Then he came over to ETH. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder if he ever comes over to XRP. He may find his way there.
It would be very interesting. You know what I'd love to hear Tom Lee really talk about is the disguised whales of Ethereum's ICO. I'd love to hear that. He never seems to want to chat about that.
No. Well, now he's got skin in the game that's a little deep.
It's a little deep.
He's trying to hold 5% of ETH.
Well, God bless him. And it does look like ETH is going to have a huge position and play a huge role, at least in the early days of this adoption, utility-driven market. And I do believe that, and I believe he's got it right on that front. However, I will say I do have concerns because I've listened to builders and they've talked about the struggle and the complications of building on the ETH network even today.
Yeah.
And I also know that it bothers me that Vitalik Buterin way back, I think it was 2015 or around that time frame, forgive me if I got the date wrong, where he accepted money from CCP China's Wan Zhang. Those things bother me. But I mean, they don't bother everybody, but they bother me. But for me also, I'm concerned that if Ethereum doesn't conquer the complications to build on its network and the gas fees coming higher as it gets populated with activity, and I know layer twos are trying to untie that problem, but nonetheless, I'm concerned that Ethereum at some point may end up like AOL in the early days of the internet. It came out, it was strong, and everybody had AOL.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now what everybody has is an email address. So maybe 8 years, 10 years from now, maybe it's all ERC20 tokens that are left, but no one's really using the network for other things. I don't know. It's what it looks like.
Well, and that's, I think this is the question that everybody's asking is, the cycles that are happening now, what we saw with the US government announcing 9 blockchains, that are going to be able to store GDP and data is what we're talking about here. When you saw that, Brad, first of all, XRP and Ripple were not mentioned. And Tron was mentioned. So I was like, wow, okay. We are definitely in the degens phase. It's
God bless Paul Barron. That's hilarious.
it's not long before I think, Tron goes into the strategic reserve. Maybe through forfeiture and seizure. We'll see. But my point being is everybody was kind of up in arms about that and saying, wait a minute, XRP is not listed. This is terrible. What is Trump thinking? All this came down. But I was kind of looking at it going, man, what a beautiful play
Yeah.
this was. Now explain, why do you think XRP was not included, at least in that group?
Look, I mean, for me, I don't know the answer, but what I'll say is the reason I can still be confident about Ripple, the company, and XRP Ledger is because of this. One, Wormhole and Python Network were highlighted as
Yep.
oracles to be used along with the 9 protocols.
Yep.
Well, Wormhole was partnered directly with Ripple and the XRP Ledger. So, again, I think the way I understand this when I look at it, and I'm not a developer, okay, so I'm not the guy to talk to about all the little factual things developer wise, but the way I look at the market and these different offerings and the 9 protocols being used, I try to remember and remind myself that the XRP ledger is a foundational infrastructure, just like TCP/IP.
Yep.
And talking about these other 9 blockchains is like talking about HTTPS being built on TCP/IP. That's how I see this. That's how I see those other chains. That's why I believe Wormhole is partnered with Ripple and the XRP ledger to provide that Oracle data, because they're really serving this multi-chain interoperability world that we're moving to.
Yeah.
And I can't say enough about this too, Paul, that, the reason you don't see the XRP family attacking other people to start an argument is because we understand fundamentally, even on a very basic level, that the XRP ledger is a foundational market infrastructure,
Right.
and it has a decentralized exchange built into that layer 1. And it's really like a world exchange. But it's not a world exchange unless all the other protocols are plugged into it to make the market for the world. So
Bingo.
that's the
Yeah.
ultimate end goal.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that everybody's missing is when you look at adoption curves and use cases, the guy who wins the use case, the utility, is usually the company that ends up kind of setting the terms.
That's absolutely spot on. And doesn't that sound exactly like what we've heard Christian Carlos say? He who has the gold make the rules, but whoever controls the payment rails runs the world. That's an almost identical take from Paul Barron, and I absolutely love that he said that way. Now, let me skip forward here. Again, this entire interview is fire, ladies and gentlemen, and I am super grateful for Paul having me on, and I hope we get to do it again soon. But take a listen to this last clip here. You're going to love it.
I want to hit on one topic that you retweeted this today.
Oh, boy.
Okay. And this was the Caitlin Long.
Oh boy.
Okay. I gotta bring this up, man. Sorry. All right. So there she is. That's Miss Caitlin Long. According to Caitlin Long, it's legalized corruption for Ripple to lobby the government. The Bitcoin lobby, however, is completely legit. Bitcoin and Ethereum proponents colluding with the government to rig a regulatory monopoly in favor of Bitcoin and ETH. That's just digital asset perspective. So when of course, you got to push back on this, because sometimes the fact that people put out like this it's almost, do they not understand the kind of double standard that's being talked about here? Why do you think we're seeing that? This is a smart lady.
She's a very smart lady, and shout out to Digital Asset Investor, the GOAT in this space. I mean, he catches it, he puts it out there. I'm like, he's so on top of it. I love it.
I think he's out there just hunting. He's the best troll I know by far.
He is. There's no question. I'm telling you, he's a cut above. And, and he gets it. He gets these clips. I'm like, I don't know how he does it, but he just does it. But no, look, I'll say this. What a shame this is, because I have been a huge supporter of Caitlin Long and Custodia Bank since their fight began. And now she's turning around and taking shots at not only Ripple and XRP, but all of the community that supports them and her.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a ridiculous move here. And I guess the biggest backslap to go back to Caitlin Long is if we're paying to play and to get into this space, who was paying when we were getting sued by the SEC for 5 years
Bingo.
and for more than a decade, Paul? Bitcoin and Ethereum have been given a free pass. That's exactly the truth. And is it now that she's upset because they're still not getting that same free pass?
Yeah.
Because we've paid to be here, but it's with blood and sweat, not just dollars.
Well, I think this really boils down to something that's almost personal for her, and that is the issue with the banking license.
And you know
'cause
what I say, Paul? Let her come to XRP Las Vegas and sit on our stage and explain that argument to
Yeah.
people. Because, until she started running her mouth about taking shots at us, we have been advocates and supporters of her getting the custodial banking license.
Yep.
And I still am. And I want her to stop that so we can unite. See, this is the same thing I was saying when we opened this conversation, that Bitcoin Vegas is taking shots and shutting us out from trying to bring that olive branch, a show of solidarity to bridge this community. The people think that they can keep this community separate, Paul, are severely mistaken.
Yeah.
Because when that market infrastructure bill goes through, we're going to see the beginning of a utility-driven market, and maxi this, maxi that. Everyone's going to laugh at you because they know it's a joke, right? It's like the big boys are coming.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the challenge, is that maybe it is it's like a fighter in the ring.
Yeah.
And they're in the 10th or the 11th round, and they got nothing to lose.
That's right.
They got nothing to lose because they know the fight's about to end. And there's going to be a winner, and then, they understand that. So I feel like it's not that they're on the ropes, but I just feel like that's how they're fighting on their heels right now. Yeah. And I don't understand that, instead of fighting from a position of power, which is something I say all the time, no matter what you're in. And that in reality is kind of the silly thing about all of this. But it's going to be something to watch for sure.
No question about it. Listen, I want to give another shout out to Paul Barron for having me on. This guy has real conversations. He touches on all the things that are prominent and standing out, issues that need to be touched on. And maybe, just maybe, if we can continue to have conversations like this with Paul and others, we can take down the VC PR machine that is ruining our opportunity to come together and dominate this space. Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, others, you name it. We can do more together than we can apart. That is absolutely certain. And I hope in some small way, this gets us started in the right direction. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. Shout out to Paul Barron. Shout out to each and every one of you. Please hit the like and subscribe and share with somebody you know. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. I'll catch all of you on the next one.